Welcome to our international conference, Today's Democracy Challenges. It's a great pleasure to be here in the Lisbon Youth Center. Hi, it's good to see some familiar people. To be here today, hosting our first conference that we hope that it's one of the many that we will do under this topic that is so close to DePaul Network, that it's democracy and local quality democracies. So today, and I didn't introduce myself yet, most of you already know me. My name is Carolina Loureiro, and I will be here today during this morning hosting this conference. We will do it in English, but in any case, I hope that if you need any translation, if you need any support, please ask to your peers. Good that I see some social media happening, people already posting in their social media. So this conference is happening under Winter Democracy Academy. It is an initiative organized by DePaul. We are having different events during this week here in Lisbon Youth Center, from the steering group of DePaul Network, from the Assembly of Members, but also a partnership building activity. And today it's one of the main highlights of this week. And I want to thank you all the participants, all the guests, everyone, from interns, from people who are in the backstage, supporting this conference to take place. And because this would not be possible without the Lisbon Youth Center and without the support of the Portuguese National Institute for Youth and Sports, I would welcome the Director of Lisbon and Tagus Valley, Eduarda Marques, to welcome our audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolina. Good morning. Dear all, I'm Eduarda Marques, Regional Director of Lisbon and Tagus Valley of the IPDJ and Director of Lisbon Youth Center. It is a pleasure to welcome you at Lisbon Youth Center of the Portuguese Institute of Sports and Youth and to host this international conference, The Current Challenges of Democracy, included in the first Winter Democracy Academy, a project co-organized by DePaul Network and the Lisbon Youth Center, in collaboration with several other institutions dedicated to working with young people in favor of democracy. First, I would like to thank DePaul and his team in person of its director, Bruno Antonio, for the challenges launched to Lisbon Youth Center to realize together this activity. Lisbon Youth Center was awarded with the Council of Europe quality label since 2015 until 2027. A youth center should be an integrated area with available resources for young people and their associations, activities with training areas, food and accommodation, respecting participants' cultural diversity in each action, a place for instruments development for youth work and for young people based on non-formal education approach in co-management principle and under Council of Europe values, rule of law, democracy and human rights. Today, I stand before you to celebrate two pillars that form the very foundation of our societies: democracy and citizenship. These concepts are not just words. They are the beating heart of our collective identity and the promise of a better future. Democracy, in its essence, is more than a political. It is a beacon of hope that shines brightly, guiding us towards a society that values equality, freedom, and justice. In the democratic framework, every voice, regardless of this origin, has the potential to resonate and shape the course of our shared destiny. As citizens of democratic nations, we are entrusted with a unique responsibility: the responsibility to actively participate in the democratic processes. Democracy is not a spectator sport. It thrives when each citizen engages in the dialogue, debates the issues, and contributes to the vibrant tapestry of ideas that make our societies strong. Citizenship is not merely a legal status. It is a call to action. It is a call to engage with the issues that matter, to vote with conviction, and to uphold the principles that define our democratic ideals. Active citizenship is the fuel that propels the engine of democracy forward. It is about understanding that our rights come with responsibilities and that by participating in the democratic process, we become architects of our shared future. Being an active citizen involves more than just casting a vote every few years. It means staying informed about the issues that affect us, advocating for justice, and being willing to stand up for the rights of others. It means participating in community initiatives, fostering dialogue, and promoting inclusivity. Democracy thrives when citizens actively work towards the common good, recognizing the inherent dignity and worth of every individual. While democracy provides a framework for collective decision making, it is not immune to challenges. Disagreements and differing opinions are inevitable, but it is through the crucible of the discussions and compromise that the true strength of democracy emerges. As citizens, we must navigate these challenges with an open mind, a commitment to dialogue, and a belief in the power of unity. In conclusion, let us embrace the gift of democracy and cherish the responsibilities of citizenship. Let us be active participants in shaping the world we want to live in, a world that values diversity, protects human rights, and upholds the principles of justice and equality. Remember, the true measure of a democracy lies not only in the strength of its institutions, but in the active engagement of its citizens. By embracing our roles as responsible and informed citizens, we contribute to the vitality of democracy, ensuring that it remains a beacon of hope for generations to come. Thank you.
Obrigada, Eduarda. Thank you. It's really a pleasure. DIPAL Network has one of its offices here. So from the start, from the beginning of DIPAL creation, this is one of our houses, homes. So also thank you for this, and thank you for being always available to host and to accept our challenges, and to all the team. Also our appreciation to all the team who supported these events and all these activities that we bring here. And now, let's move on. And we have Bruno Antonio, that I guess that some of you already know. So Bruno Antonio is the Executive Director of DIPAL Network.
Hello. Hello, good morning. Thank you, Carolina. Good morning, everyone. Very fast. I'll try to be also fast here in my intervention, but it's with great pleasure that I'm here today in the name of the DIPAL Network to have this high moment of our week. The conference is one of the activities that is in the framework of the Winter Democracy Academy. It's the first edition, and I would like especially to thank CJL and all the team, Eduardo and all her team, for supporting us along all these preparatory processes. IPDJ, the Youth Institute for Youth and Sports, and also all the participants that are here. We have close to 20 countries that are here, people that have come here for different reasons. Some that have come here to develop projects and to write projects on the topic of democracy. Very much connected to the discussions that we'll have today and the reflections that we have today, that we already started yesterday. Some of the colleagues have come from our member organizations to help us to reflect how to continue improving our work. The DIPAL Network, for the ones that don't know, it's an European network that gathers close to 90 organizations at the moment, and what puts them together is this topic, basically, is to try to have more mechanisms, more structures, more spaces where young people can really influence what is the decisions, what is the democratic process at the local level, so that local authorities are able to have the capacity to use the potential of young people, to have their thoughts, their initiative, this active citizenship that Eduardo was also highlighting in her speech, that young people they have, and if they are provided with the opportunity, with the right space, we can really see results out of that. And hopefully, during these days, it's also a space for inspiration. I was hearing yesterday how people got inspired with the model that we were exploring from Norway, from Kristiansand. It's also a moment to see how different institutions, different partners, they are working on this topic. Because fortunately, there is a lot of different initiatives, different projects that are in place that are tackling some of the challenges of democracy. Hopefully during this week, and this conference will be also an opportunity for it, we'll also have the chance to get also data, get also information. We need to be able to do our projects, do our policies based on evidence. And last week, I had the pleasure to be with Dr. Maria Manuel, that is also here. She is coordinator of the observatory, of Permanent Observatory on Youth, or Youth Observatory. I don't know the exact order in English, but basically is one of the main key stakeholders researching on the youth issues in Portugal. And her colleagues were also highlighting and showing the evidence. And the evidence was clear. There is a willingness from youth to get engaged. Often they don't relate with the traditional spaces and traditional forms. There is a responsibility also of the traditional forms and the institutions to rethink on how they're approaching and how they're engaging young people. There was also evidence and data on how municipalities are engaging and what kind of infrastructure and what kind of support they have to young people. And it was really alarming on one aspect but I see that many municipalities are here, so there is also this willingness to do difference. But when we see this closest link with citizens and the capacity to engage citizens and young citizens, we see that municipalities, they still have a lot that they can do. There's a huge potential there, but they need support, they need resources. And yesterday, having another conversation here with a municipality from Portugal that was also here present, was highlighting the importance that the institutions they need to have, and the Portuguese Youth Institute for Youth and Sports needs to have on this role. He has a fundamental role, a key role on supporting youth work, on supporting youth associations. Portugal is also a good reference on the number of youth associations, bodies where young people are deciding, they are creating their projects, and it's from young people to all the community, but young people are taking the leadership. But there's another key stakeholder when we talk about youth work, when we talk about democratic engaging of young people, that are local authorities, and they need support. And I believe that the Portuguese Youth Institute here could and will have for sure a bigger role in supporting this claim and this request also from many municipalities across the country to have more support, to be able to structure their service, to be able to have more practice, more approaches, to be able to learn from their peers in order to create more spaces, better spaces for meaning engagement of young people. I had here my notes, but I don't remember them. I don't feel like opening the book at this moment, but just to close, Portugal now, it's celebrating, or next year will make 50 years of living in a democracy. And this is one of the things that we are also celebrating, and it has been 2 or 3 years of celebration of this moment. It's a very important moment for Portugal. We had 48 years of a very intense dictatorship in the country. And until very recently, the speech was also, we were excusing many things in terms of a democratic culture, because we consider ourselves as still a new democracy. After 50 years, when I will be 50, I'll still say that I'm young. This is a fact. But I don't think we can still consider ourselves as a young democracy. We cannot still use this excuse of being a young democracy for allowing some low quality of democratic spaces, low quality of engagement, of young engagement of citizens, of losing spaces of participation and influencing power in decision making. And there is also something that research says, yesterday we also highlighted this huge gap between what is the citizens' willingness and capacity to participate in our institutions. And I think now is more than the moment to try many different approaches, to try many different initiatives, projects, small scale, big scale, approaching the educational system, trying in the NGOs, trying in the municipalities, that we experiment, that we give the youngsters and the citizens, but in this case, looking at the youngsters, the opportunity for them to understand democracy, practice democracy, but also to innovate in democracy. We need the capacity to try different forms, small scale. Some will work and some others, and hopefully today we'll see some initiatives that are taking place. So we'll be showcasing some of the best practice that we have in Portugal in terms of, again, innovating in democracy, allowing young people to understand democracy, but allowing this potential that is the best that we have in our society, that young people to be really engaged and not getting far and far away. Our institutions, our model, they need. And just to close, a big thank you for being here during this week. Most of you will continue on the different activities, from the partnership building activity, study visits that we'll have, to different things that we'll have during this week. Hopefully this will be the first edition of the Winter Democracy Academy, but Dipal is already launching the challenges for the Portuguese Youth Institute, for Lisbon Youth Center, for the Observatory, and for other stakeholders that are here, that we are able to sit in January. Let's close the year and let's start a new year. And for the coming edition that we have, for example, the European Youth Press that is also here with us, that we have a perspective coming from the young journalists or the press on what are the challenges of democracy, that we have a perspective from research. And this Youth Democracy Academy can become to be an annual event where more stakeholders will have a moment to reflect on the state of art, on how things are going, but also to get inspired. We need inspiration. We are still swimming against the tide, okay? And we need inspiration, we need motivation from our peers, we need the capacity to cross sectors, from research to media, to the youth workers, to the public authorities, to cross this capacity of building projects that are able to tackle the big challenges that we'll have, and not being pessimistic, but the challenge will only grow in the coming years. So our capacity to be able to work together, to develop projects, synergies, to more than projects and to pass to programs, to enter into the education system, to enter into the local authorities, and to have really a more structural, systematic, stronger approach into the topic on how we are preparing young people for democracy, how we are creating spaces for them to practice democracy, and how we are innovating are essential. So thank you very much for your presence again, and hopefully this morning will be quite inspiring for what we have to do and for future projects and future synergies. Thank you very much.
Okay, now I have a microphone. I like it better here. Okay, just before I introduce our next guest, I would like also to briefly present you our program. I'm sure that you checked it. I'm sure that you know everything that it will be happening today, but I wanted also to highlight some of the things that we will have. So, we will now start with some data. For sure that you have perceptions of what is happening at your local level, in your realities, but let's base our perceptions in facts, numbers, things that people who know what they are doing, researchers, universities, can show us with their evidence. And we will start with that, with a small presentation of what are today's democracy challenges. And after that, we'll give the floor also to some young people, for them to share with us what is their vision, what can be their role in this transforming democracy, having stronger democracies, having democracy alive. After this round table where we will have these young people, we will have a very awesome moment, which is coffee break. And why am I saying this? Because it's the perfect moment to network. Here we are listening, we are getting inspired, we are sharing practices, but this happens in the informal part. So please, feel welcome, and we encourage you to check who is around, okay? Some people are just here today, so please, during coffee break, take this opportunity to see what are the practices. If you listen to someone that you found interesting, some speakers, some guests, please approach this person. And after the coffee break, there will be also coffee, some goodies. After coffee break, we will have practices. So different projects, different initiatives, so it will be more concrete. We are talking about youth participation, democracy. But how does this happen? How can we do it? And maybe we cannot make all the changes at the same time. So let's see. What are the different approaches that are happening? And we will have these 3 projects being presented, and after that we will also share with you some of the tools that you can use in your work, in your context, either working with young people, with your colleagues. And this is a sum up of what we will have today. And now I will invite Sofia Serra Silva. She's a scientist. She will present us this data that we really want to know. She's a political scientist working for the University of Lisbon. And yes, a big applause to Sofia Serra Silva.
Hello everyone, good morning. So just 1 second. if it's working. Yes, it's working. So, again, good morning. I'm Sofia. I'm a political scientist, and I was invited to talk about the challenges, the many challenges that democracies are facing. However, I prefer to talk about pathologies, the political pathologies afflicting contemporary democracies. And this expression, pathologies, places the focus on dysfunctions and symptoms within the democratic system. So the choice of this particular terminology, pathologies, implies a deeper analysis of issues that may undermine or threaten the proper functioning of our democratic systems. So you might have heard of these pathologies, right? Legitimacy crisis, democratic decline, democratic deficit, and so on. What I have to say, and the first main takeaway message, the first lesson is that these pathologies are not new. As you can see from this very long list of publications, they are not exactly the same thing. These three different concepts, they all share a common interest in figuring out what's not working in our democratic regimes. Now, the debate is not something novel, it's not something new. Political scientists and others have been talking about these issues, the democratic decline, the democratic deficits, for many years by now. So this is something that it's not new, as you can see. These are also very interesting books, so if you want to take a picture, they are all very interesting. So here we have two good examples of that. So we have two publications. What divides these two publications are more than 40 years. You have one publication on the legitimacy crisis from the 80s and one just published 2023, so this year. So even though what divides them, it's just a very long period of time, of 40 years, they do talk and are concerned with the same issue, the legitimacy crisis of representative democracies. And that would be, again, as I said before, the first main takeaway message. So we are not dealing with something new. So these problems, challenges, if you prefer, or pathologies, as I prefer, they are not novel, they are not new. And that is important to start our conversation on these issues. So, what are these symptoms, or what are the main symptoms of these pathologies? Here we have some examples. So the erosion of traditional party system, citizens' feelings of disempowerment, citizens' feelings of alienation towards politics, dissatisfaction with the way democracy is working, the outsized influence of money in politics, widespread perceptions of public sector corruption as well, of course, increasing levels of abstention, and an increasing gap between citizens' democratic expectations and the reality of political practice, something that Bruno already told us. So together, these problems, these symptoms, these challenges point to a fundamental challenge, which is the widespread erosion of our democratic values. And I would like to start our conversation with that. So let's see some examples, and let's see some empirical data on at least three of these main symptoms, or at least these three main political pathologies. So I said before that we are seeing a gap between citizens' democratic expectations and the reality of political practice, right? So here we have data from the European Social Survey. On the left, you have data survey data from 2020, and it's a comparison between citizens' expectation, citizens' importance on 12 different aspects of democracy, compared to what extent that those 12 aspects are applicable, are happening in real life, in practice, in their democracies. So as you can see, you already are able to see a kind of a gap between the importance citizens are placing on these issues, such as elections being free and competitive, minorities having their rights protected, and so on. between the importance citizens place on these issues compared to how those different aspects are happening in real life. And then on the second picture, we have a kind of composite index of both all of these 12 dimensions. Here we can compare the average importance placed on these 12 democratic aspects compared to the average applicability. And you see the gap between how citizens place importance on these issues compared to their applicability. Of course, there are differences across countries. We see that the gap is wider for a large group of countries where Portugal is included, and so on. Let me say that just going back, so if we ask if in Europe we are facing a democratic deficit, it seems like European citizens seem to think so. That in fact, on a range of different aspects, European citizens evaluate their democracies as underperforming compared to their expectations. That's quite important. And this is an incredibly important piece of evidence that we have concerning the crisis of legitimacy of representative democracies. But again, that's not something new, right? Here we have this incredibly interesting book from Vivian Hart from the late 70s on distrust and democracy. And you can see that Vivian was already talking about a contradiction between the ideals of democracy and the day-to-day activities of government. She was already talking about an imminent crisis of the legitimacy of political institutions, about the perception of a discrepancy between the ideals and realities of the political process itself, which she called political distrust. So again, late 70s. So the problem of legitimacy in representative democracies happens when we have that gap between norms and between reality. It's the comparison between the democratic ideals and the real existing functioning of democracy that makes a judgment about the legitimacy of a democratic regime. So everyone here makes these legitimacy judgments about what's happening in our democracy. It's a judgment that is made of this comparison between our perceptions and between what's happening in real life. So when norms and reality deviate, we have a gap, and authority will be considered to suffer from a legitimacy gap or a legitimacy deficit. That's why we are having these legitimacy issues in representative democracies, when we have that gap, when norms and reality deviate, okay? So this gap between citizens' expectations and what they are seeing happening in real life, in their democracies, is not the only piece of evidence we have on the crisis on the legitimacy crisis or the democratic deficit. We can also look at other evidence. So let's look at turnout, right? So this is not something particular novel or it's not new, right? So we are seeing an increasing level of abstention, and in this case of this particular image, what you are seeing is the turnout decreasing over the years, both in established European countries and also in post-communist countries in Europe. So the decline on average for established European countries is more or less 10% over this period. So it's an average decline in terms of turnout. For post-communist countries in Europe, over the same period, the average decline is higher, is 20%. Okay, so another symptom of these democratic deficits is the widespread perceptions of public sector corruption. Here we have the Corruption Perception Index, which is a really interesting index that the International Transparency builds up. And here we have a quite a quite clear picture. So more than 2/3 of these cases, of these countries that are analyzed in this particular index, they score below 50. And we are talking about an index that ranges from 0 to 100. So they are scoring below the average of that index. What the data from International Transparency shows is that the control for corruption has been static. It has not changed. We are not making any improvements in that. And just to give you an example, since 2012, 25 countries significantly improved their scores, but at the same time we had 23 countries getting worse on perceptions of corruption. So we are not moving forward in terms of citizens' perceptions of corruption. Okay, so I don't have much time to discuss the many other worrying signs that we are witnessing in our democracies. So we looked at evidence about the gap between expectations and what's happening in real life in democracies. We look at turnout and also the widespread perceptions of public corruption. Now let's talk about some good news for a change. There are some interesting experiences happening across the globe that are trying to tackle these issues, right? I'm going to talk now about democratic innovations or more democracy experiences. They go by different names. So we are talking about initiatives, experiences, and efforts that are taking place both at local and national levels. They are led by political institutions such as parliaments, political parties, local political authorities as well, but also by citizens groups and advocacy groups. And they are both happening in the virtual environment, in the virtual space, and of course physical spaces as well. The goal of these democratic experiences across the globe that are taking place now is to rethink democratic representation in a way that opens up to ordinary citizens. That's the main goal of these democratic experiences, and I'm going to talk about that next. So here we have some examples of public engagement initiatives happening across the globe. So we are talking about mini-publics, citizens' assemblies, participatory budgeting, e-petitioning, crowdsourcing methods, deliberative polls, town hall meetings, but of course, increasing public engagement and integrating citizens in the formal political process, in the decision-making process. I prefer to see it as a wide range of possibilities, right? We can integrate or have public engagement initiatives that strive only for passive involvement, for passive engagement from the citizens, or as you can see from these examples, they are all examples of active forms of engaging the public, okay? However, I have to make this disclaimer here, okay? Even though we are looking at these interesting examples, and I will show you 3 different cases, we are seeing mini-publics, we are seeing e-petitioning, we are seeing youth parliaments, for instance, happening in different parliaments. We are seeing crowdsourcing methods as well, crowdsourcing methods to draft legislation and so on, or the constitution itself. Even though we see that, I have to make this disclaimer because not all democracies are actively pursuing public engagement strategies, okay? So even though that's a very interesting picture, that doesn't mean that all democracies or political actors are actively pursuing public engagement strategies. Also, it doesn't mean that the institutions are investing equally in the same form of engagement, right? We have passive and active forms of engagement. And political actors and political institutions are selective in their approach. I study mostly what parliaments do in terms of public engagement. And I can tell you, they are very selective in their public engagement initiatives and strategies. Also, that doesn't mean that political institutions are always interested in hearing what ordinary citizens have to say, and I will talk about that in a minute. This is a long disclaimer. So that also doesn't mean that these experiences and initiatives are effectively and inclusively integrating ordinary citizens. They might have that goal, that intended goal, but that doesn't mean that they are doing that effectively. Also, more democracy experiments are not always promoting, or they are not always promoting trust and legitimacy. Again, they might have that goal, but it doesn't mean they are doing that unequivocally. Also, public engagement in politics is not exclusive dependent on political institutions, okay? Even though the cases I'm going to bring, they are all cases of initiatives and efforts coming from political actors and political institutions. As I said before, there are plenty of initiative and experiences happening because they are being driven by citizens groups, advocacy groups, and so on, okay? So, disclaimer is finished, and now let's talk about this new paradigm that we have, that we are witnessing, these different initiatives and experiences happening across the globe. Despite the emergence of this kind of new paradigm, I have to make another two very small disclaimers. One is that there are still many examples of political institutions and political actors, again, who are not interested in sharing power or engaging in dialogical exchange with ordinary citizens. And I will talk about that, and I will give you a specific example of that. A second important issue is that more democracy experiences, sometimes they appear to be falling short of their intended goals, which ultimately, besides promoting deliberation, collective discussion about important issues, ultimately they want to promote trust in the political system and trust in the political actors. And as I said, sometimes they fell short of their intended goals. Now let's see some examples. So if I ask you what these pictures portray, you probably can remember. This was earlier this year, right? This was the protests over the bill that passed in France, bypassing the parliament, about pensioners, right? Increasing the age of retirement, okay? So the French government and the president, what they did, they used a legal maneuver, right? Which is in the French constitution to push a bill to the National Assembly, the French parliament, without a vote. So bypassing the parliament. Something like the US is now doing with bypassing the Congress for approving money for Israel. So that was legal, and it is in the constitution. It has been used in the past, as you can see, but many view this maneuver or this technicality as not democratic. Okay? And because of that, it was very controversial. It led and resulted in multiple demonstrations. More than 1 million people went to the streets to show their disagreement with that, with the process itself and with the bill in particular, okay? So we have some survey data that help us to understand what was the feelings of citizens regarding this particular bill and the process, okay? So here I brought some survey data that shows that 83% of young adults and 78% of those aged over 35 found the government's way of passing the bill unjustified, okay? Even among pro-Macron voters, those that voted for him in the last year presidential election, a majority of those voters disagreed with how the law was passed, regardless of their thoughts on the reform itself and on the bill itself, okay? So we are seeing a tension, right, between what citizens want and their expectations and what happened in the political process. Here we have an article that was published in The Guardian, and we have an interview from one of the protesters. She says that there was no democratic process in the way it was done. We feel very looked down. The point of a representative democracy is to listen to other points of view existing in the country and compromise if possible. So again, the tension we can see from this interview was there. And because of that tension, we can ask and we can wonder about the repercussions of such an event, right? So we had so many people demonstrating their disagreement with the process and the bill. And again, it passed. I don't know if you kept up with the news, but the bill is already in place. So there was this interesting survey that found out that Marine Le Pen's far-right party was the biggest beneficiary of French discontent over President Emmanuel Macron's decision to push through this bill. So again, because of we are seeing these dynamics, we have to ask what kind of impact this kind of problems and tension we are seeing have ultimately for trust in political system. Is it undermining the legitimacy of the government? Is it undermining the legitimacy of democratic principles and the functioning of democratic systems? So to conclude, regarding to this particular event, these events unfolded in France. They are a good example for two reasons. One, to show us that political authorities sometimes, or if you are more pessimist, most of the times, they fail to listen to citizens. And second, it's also a good example of a case where a political institution, specifically one very important in the political system, the parliament, was bypassed and excluded from policy-making decisions. So it's not just citizens that are excluded from the process. Of course, the full impact of these events on public views, on citizens' perceptions and citizens' feelings about the government, about the political system in France, they remain to be seen, but it's likely to be negative, as we said, as I think I said before. So let's move to another example, okay? Not sure if you, probably some of you are familiar with what happened in Iceland between 2010 and 2013. It was a citizens' assembly, one very ambitious project of citizens' assembly. Citizens were invited to discuss and review the constitution. This was the first crowdsourced constitutional project in the world, okay? So constitution revision is often considered to be something best left to experts. Here they attempt to do something differently, right? So crowdsource methods, it's just this idea that we can use the wisdom of the crowds and collectively we can think and revise important issues. In this case was the most important legislation piece of the country. It was the constitution. So this was considered in the literature in political science and political theory, in particular, the first and most ambitious effort at rethinking democratic practices in a systematic way. And I have to tell you that this happened in during 2010, 2013, and of course, this was a decision that resulted from the collapse of the banking system in 2008 in Iceland, and of course, because of the widespread distrust towards the political parties. So what happened? Anyone knows? No? Okay. So the ending story here is not positive. It's not very interesting because what happened is that the parliament found a way to avoid to vote on the draft. So this was a very ambitious project, one of its kind across the globe, As you can see, it was a very complex process. We started with a national forum with randomly selected citizens. At some point, there was a non-binding referendum, and then nothing happened. It was one really interesting case because of that as well. And if you want to look at this in more deep, Landmore 2020 book on open democracy is specifically about this, and it's a quite interesting one. Reasons for the failure. So one of the reasons was the Iceland public, who once the worst of the economic crisis had passed, failed to rally around the project and continue to work and placing and putting pressure on the project and the constitutional reform to happen. Others blame it on the parties, of course, politicians, and even academics that felt threatened by the prospect of change and also frustrated for not having any control, any say during the process. And of course, Landmore also highlights the hostility of powerful economic interests that were very hostile towards specific provisions in the constitutional reform bill. So, and to conclude, I would like to finish with another interesting case. It was the Conference on the Future of Europe. Perhaps that's more familiar to you. It happened last year. It was a very complex stage of multiple steps involved here. They had a multilingual digital platform gathering comments and citizens' inputs from different European member states. There were national events across European members. There were citizens' panels. The members of the European Parliament were involved as well. So it was the first experiment in transnational deliberative democracy. So citizens, again, European citizens in this case, were selected and invited to discuss about some of the four main issues about the future of the European Union. And of course, some believe that it has laid the foundation for participatory democracy in the European Union. I'm more pessimist, to be honest. And I will say, and I will try to make an evaluation on what was the success of these experiments. So we can assess or measure success of these experiments by looking at different dimensions, right? We can look towards their capacity of mobilization. Did it manage to mobilize a lot of participants, a lot of citizens? In this case, data shows that considering all those events, so it wasn't the case of having just one citizens' assembly. We had multiple events across member states, supranational kind of events as well. And considering all these steps and all these events, less than 1% of the European Union population participated in this overall conference. I will leave to you your considerations of if it's successful or not, giving those numbers. We also can measure in terms of the quality of the process and the quality of deliberation. So citizens' assemblies, one of the main goals is to promote deliberation, right? Promote these collective discussions. And only 25% of the plenary where decisions on the final report were adopted. So in the setting that I showed before, it was the most important place where decisions were then adopted. Only 25% of that of the plenary were actually ordinary citizens. And finally, we can also think about how successful this was by looking at its impact. And the final report contains 49 measures. The problem is that some of those measures implies and require changes in treaties. That's something quite complex and difficult to do within the European Union framework. And many European Union member states, they didn't feel like they were having another change in another treaty. So looking at these different dimensions, this was an interesting case, an example of a transnational deliberative effort, but still there is much to do. Also, when we are talking about democratic innovations, success means that citizens must be enabled to take ownership and lead the process and define the topics. That didn't happen here. So the process was much led by the members of the European Parliament, and citizens didn't have the choice to choose the topics as well. There were already 4 main issues that were selected for this exercise. So the main takeaway message here, these cases serve as a reminder that despite these recent efforts, despite these experiences happening and taking place across the globe to promote public engagement, political authorities may not always be willing to listen to citizens' voices, even when they are the ones establishing these instruments and establishing platforms to listen to citizens, okay? Like the case of Iceland, right? It was a political decision to have that citizen assembly to revise and rewrite the constitution, and then the same authorities did not go through with citizens' proposals. Also, poorly conducted and poorly developed democratic innovations may have the opposite impact of what is intended, okay? So if they are not conducted carefully, we know, I didn't show evidence, but you can take my word, we know that has a negative impact. It leads to frustration towards the process and frustration towards the political institutions and the political system as well. So, to conclude, we might ask to what extent these pathologies that I talked earlier in my presentation, and that those pathologies or challenges that we are witnessing in our democracies, to what extent they can be addressed through increased democratic innovations, these more democracies experiences, through opening up democracy to citizens. Will they solve everything? Should we raise our hopes? I think, let me just, one second. Yeah, so I think there are interesting initiatives. The Iceland one, it was very ambitious and very interesting initiative. And there are in fact efforts that reflect a positive change. However, we can see that there is a clear tension between those interested in opening up the traditional channels of democracy and those who are not interested and do not perceive that as important or necessary, because that's 2 different things, right? And we are living in that tension. We are living in that tension between these 2 groups and between these 2 ideals of how democracy should work. And for that reason, I think we should be cautious about this good news and about these experiences and initiatives taking place. And I'm sorry for not finishing up with a more positive note. It's more a cautious note about the potential of these experiences. I think it's great that we are having them. It shows clearly an effort to improve representative democracy, but still there is much to do regarding their implementation and regarding their impact. I think that's the most important issue. It's considering their impact. So ultimately, I think we are living in that kind of tension between these 2 forces, those that really want to and are interested in opening up, and those that do not see that as important or even necessary. And that would be my final note. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sofia. I'm here on your right. Sofia, okay, that's also fine. Thank you, Sofia. Yes. Sofia will join us in the next panel. But first, in And I think Sophia brought a lot of insights, interesting insights, some of them that we tackled yesterday in our joint session, those who were here, but also this idea of experimenting, but also be careful, right? If we experiment too much, and if we are taking a step bigger than what we can, what the citizens are able to do it might work the opposite way. And now, let's have here on the stage some young people, some people with some background on youth participation, with many very different experience, and they will share a bit their thoughts on the emerging solutions for youth participation challenges. For that, we will have Bruno moderating this panel, and with him we will have Robin, Clara, and Simona. And yes, you can come to the stage, an applause. And
I project my voice. I'm with a bit of a cough, so this will help me a bit. So welcome to the roundtable. A bit of a reaction to Sophia state of art, and thank you for sharing also these perspectives, these also interesting results of different studies, of different outcomes of these pathologies. And I think it was very interesting to approach it from this perspective, because usually a pathology can be solved. Some of them are chronic or taking many years, but usually there's ways to mitigate them, to try to become more healthy, let's say. But I think the colleagues will react on it, and we'll have here an interesting talk about it. I would like to introduce Robin. Robin Balza, right? I tried. Almost. So Robin was president for 5 years of the ASEAN Union of Youth Parliaments in Germany. Is quite active working on institutionalized participation, but also on the campaign of lowering the age range for 16s, for young people to start to vote from 16s, and is been supporting, trying to build advisory bodies for youth representatives in local structures. Thank you for joining, and he's also part of the advisory, of the steering group of the DIPAL network. Then we have also with me on my right side a colleague from Portimão, Simona Blosenko. Simona has been also very active and been president of a youth association or school some years ago, but has been also representing the young people in different bodies, from the Child Rights Protection Commission, the first edition of it, and the only one till now, and other European consultation bodies. She's a student of illustration and visual arts, and she's part of the Bridging Europeans Together Association. Okay, interesting. There's another sentence here that I'm taking some time to read it, because it was just, he says here that she's 20 years old Moldovan, and I had some difficulties to read it, because last week when we were in the Conference of Democracy, Simona told me that she would share with the group that she was not able to vote, even if she grew up in Portugal for more than, I don't know, more than 10 years. And being president of the association, being very active, and for me was a finding that time. But we have also Clara Amant, okay? She holds a degree on communication science from Nova University of Lisbon, and a master degree in the arts and society from Utrecht University, Netherlands. She was a project assistant manager in Teaching Art One, a Dutch NGO focusing on transnational projects that work at the intersections between human rights, democracy, and art. Quite interesting bridges, I would say. Currently, she's part of managing the board of Gerador, an independent non-profit platform for journalism, culture, and education, whose values are deeply rooted in promoting participative citizenship. In this association, she oversees the development of training courses and research studies, while also co-managing the organization Transnational Partners, transnational projects. So thank you for accepting the invitation and for joining this round table. Maybe, I don't know who would like first to react. I have a couple of questions, but maybe I would pass just the floor to one of you that would like to see how it was, this presentation, how you see these pathologies. Do you relate with them? But also from another perspective, that is, what kind of solutions do you see for some of the pathologies? And maybe we could start from this perspective of what can we do, what is being also done that can deal and can approach these pathologies. Who would like to start? So I pass to my right side.
Good morning, everybody. I'm so sorry for my voice today. I woke up without one, but I already drank a tea, and I think it sounds a bit better. I don't know, don't you agree? Yeah, okay. Thank you, that builds up my confidence. So, because I was drinking the tea during your presentation, but there was one thing that stuck with me, which was when you said that political authorities may not always be listened to listen to citizens' voice. I really resonate with that, because I think when we speak about citizens, we have to include all types of citizens, but if we look specifically at youth citizens and youth voices, they are less willing to listen to those ones. So for that, like, I'm very lucky to be in this round table with you all. Thank you so much, Deepal, for thinking of me to be here, and it's very nice to meet you all, but like you said, you didn't finish it with very positive notes, but I think here in our discussions, maybe we can think of some positive solutions with that.
Thank you, Simona. Do I pass? I go pass.
Hello. Good morning, everyone. Yes, thank you so much for the invitation. It's very nice to be in a panel with so many young people. It was very interesting to hear Sophia's presentation. I think it's a really thorough diagnosis of the context and the times that we are living in. For me personally, the most interesting part were the examples, because they were very well outlined, and I think a good way to bring this topic into discussion is to come out of the more abstract or theoric way of looking at things, which is also very important, but sometimes in order to make it more concrete to people, I think the examples are a really good way to start a discussion and to make more visible that some things clearly are not working very well. Yes, I think it's a good time to discuss some possible paths and solutions, and hopefully maybe Sophia can also share a good example for a more positive note, but maybe not, because those are the ones that we really need to work on more.
Well, yeah, good morning from my side just as well, and thank you, Sophia, so much for that presentation. I fear that, unfortunately, most of us could relate to the presentation a little more than we all would want to. I personally come from a background in youth participation on a local level, so youth parliaments, sort of an institutionalized approach of participating in democracies. And unfortunately, I feel like this sort of criticism towards projects that are done only to be done and not really to sort of enrich a democratic process are really much more of a challenge than we can see. Because quite frankly, there is different ways for young people to participate in Germany, for example, when it comes to political decisions on a local level. But then again, it's only limited to a very specific group. You have to be privileged in a sense already to get in there, because if you look at the participants of these institutions, then you realize, okay, it's mostly people from backgrounds with a high academic and financial standard. And these are all challenges and pathologies that I'm excited to talk about. But then again, I would like to sort of agree with you. Let's try to develop some optimism as well. Let's see what we can actually do to get out of these pathologies. And quite frankly, the first book you mentioned, Sophia, on your presentation was from 1973, I imagine it was. So quite a while ago. We made it that far, right? We made it that far at this point. So let's see that we can go for 50 more years and then even more, and let's see how we can do that. But, yeah.
Thank you, Robin. Maybe I can launch here a first question and to Sophia, but to all of you, if you want to react. That is, I think you tackled also one point that was the distrust. And when I say distrust, is about sharing power. You really highlighted, or at least I got really this part. How are our institutions, how are our politicians able to share power? And sharing power with citizens, sharing power with young people in particular, how they are ready for that, how they are willing for that. But on the other side, how are we civil society, are we also NGOs, are we as practitioners that are working on these topics, and also as public authorities, we have different people here representing public authorities, building these relations of trust that can also contribute that there is a bigger level of sharing of power, because in the end, when it comes to decision making, this is about sharing power. So in your perspective, do you think that nowadays, with this increase of this gap, of these expectations of citizens in general, and young people in particular, to our institutions, to the democracy, this abstention and this raising of abstention on elections, but not seen only in objections, but seen in other also processes, do you think there is an opportunity now for the system to start to realize that is fundamental to try to do things differently and to share more power? Or do you think this is too much optimistic? But also in your perspective, how can we build these trust relations and be able to have a bigger balance, I would say, between what is representative democracy and also participatory democracy?
I have one, but I don't know if it's working. I don't think so.
I think so.
It works? Oh, okay, good. So, hello again, and so much to cover. I would start by saying that what you said about citizens and inclusivity, I think it's quite important, because I work mostly on parliaments and how build public engagement strategies. And one of the issues that we are most concerned now is about inclusivity and how we engage a diverse range of people and how we engage hard-to-reach people, those voices that are not often included in political conversations. And that's a challenge, and I don't think anyone has a solution for that problem. A second important issue is, yes, political authorities, they are not always interested in listening to citizens. And it's also important to say that combined to another element, that is, the way political authorities looked at these exercises, at public engagement, these initiatives, democratic innovations and so on, also varies a lot on political leadership. I will give you an example. The House of Commons in the UK had a speaker, John Bercow, for many, many years, that invested a lot of the parliament resources on political engagement surveys. They had a committee with academics and experts trying to understand the problems of how and to what extent and why British citizens are not engaging with politics. And they had something that here in Portugal we don't have, which was these political engagement audits, was these, I think it was annual surveys collecting data on political engagement, on citizens' attitudes towards politics, towards politicians, and so on. Then the speaker now there was a change, and there is a different person. So, and this new speaker completely removed that financial resources that were placed for studying public engagement, and for these working committees, and for the staff as well. We are talking about one of the most interesting cases in terms of parliaments promoting public engagement. The House of Commons has done a lot of work on that issues. The most interesting examples that I see in my line of work, they are from the UK. So it's quite sad to see that because of that political leadership change, it's going to change a lot. So political leadership is quite important as well. So even in the case of Portugal, again, the examples I will put forward are about Parliament. Sorry for that bias. But when I study the journey that the Portuguese Parliament has done so far on public engagement, which is quite positive, perhaps you don't know that, but the journey has been quite positive. It also, you see that the leadership is a great part of the deal. So political leaders, the Speaker of the House, the MPs, the leaders of the party groups and so on. Sometimes what it takes is just having one person that really believes that we need to listen to citizens, we need to build these strategies and place the resources into that. So political leadership, I didn't cover that in my presentation, but it's quite important. So having said that, I have to conclude that because political leadership is important, we are always going to be in these variation across time. So we are always having times that will have political leaders interested in listening to citizens, and others that we really don't have that privilege or that platform that allow us to have more to say. Let's see. How can we solve this? I mean, that's the $1 million question, right? So it's quite complex, it's quite complicated. What I think it's important is that when these instruments, when these democratic experiences, these democratic innovations are established, it's really important for citizens and for their impact on citizens to be well developed and established. There is one interesting study from Estonia that shows that they had a citizens' assembly after a huge political scandal about money and politics a few years ago. So they had this huge citizens' assembly, and one thing so citizens' feelings back then was very low and very negative, right? So major political scandal. And what they saw in this citizens' assembly was that because of the context and because citizens were so much alienated and not satisfied with politicians at that time, regardless of the output of the citizens' assembly, it did not have a positive impact on political trust. So again, it's how these instruments and these experiences are conducted, but it's also about the context and the circumstances and the time they are happening in. So I would leave these two important notes.
Thank you, Sophia. Because sometimes I was questioning if they are not interested to engage citizens or they don't know how, because and sometimes maybe it's one and the other. But I come more from the youth field and youth perspective, and we work a lot with youth consultation. So now not now, but for many years, there's a lot of financing from different European institutions to have the voice of young people. and have the voice of young people on different levels to be heard. So many institutions here in Portugal, organizations from civil society, from the National Youth Council to different organizations from municipalities and so on, they usually apply and they do this kind of youth dialogue. So there's a methodology even of having the voice of young people. But I really relate with the quality of the process and how easily this also can backfire on one side. Because often what we see, and we recently had the situation of the same area of Portugal to have because of three projects, it was even 4 projects. Another consultation, another consultation, another consultation. Most probably are the same young people because are the ones that are easily to reach. And then they don't see the results of it. They really don't see what their opinions, what their thoughts, what their recommendations, what was the follow-up of it. And I think on this part, I think there is still a lot that we can do, especially in the youth field of improving these methodologies in order to systematize, to have then process that can be transferred to other citizens and not just on young people, but can be transferred with a more safe, because they've been tested, they've been tried. But I think us that often are also conducting this kind of process of auscultation have a lot of responsibility. Also institutions, even the house that we are, and I remember another example that was the national participatory budget. Is one of we were even considered an European good practice, the only country in the world to have a national participatory budget for youth on national level. And after some years it stopped because it took so much time to see the results of the implementation of the results of the projects of young people that, so I think sometimes there is a good willingness, and this is very positively, but I think Sophia highlighted the importance that we also careful on how we do things for things not to backfire, and even to build more distrust between young people or citizens and frustration and institutions. So you want to react?
Yeah, I'd love to, because obviously we got to talk about the challenges and the problems, and I guess addressing these by even reflecting on critical situations in which single participatory projects don't work is the right way to reflect on that and to see what we can do better. But I would even like to be a little bit more optimistic and offering some more practical solution on the local level that I experienced partly because it's still a work in progress, because still the question is if policymakers, if Parliament really is willing to do what it takes to engage young people. So I gotta put my optimism in brackets, let's say. But this isn't an economics lecture, but still I feel like one of the key words may be diversification. So the diversification of different methods of letting young people participate. I'm going to be honest with all of you. For quite a while I thought, okay, youth parliaments are the one and only and by far the best way to engage young people in democratic processes. Why? Well, because it's democratic in its own. You get elected by young people to represent them, to draft movements towards parliament and so on. This got to be the gold standard. No, it's not. It's not, at least when it's only acting on its own, I feel, because I personally got very lucky because I was sitting in a classroom and a young person from the youth parliament came up to me and said, "Hey, there's this opportunity to be engaged in a youth parliament. Wanna run as a candidate?" And I did, and it worked. But this is not the reality for a lot of people, and a lot of people may not be even interested into running for parliament for the exact same reasons that you mentioned, Bruno. For the reasons that, okay, what happens after my 2-year mandate? Is there like something tangible? Is there really a result? Question mark. So diversification. And I'll end with that, is the combination, I feel, of different ways of participation. A youth parliament may work great, but like going to youth centers, for example, to approach young people there who are not active in any organized form, and who are maybe even living in areas where there is a lack of education, a lack of financial resources. And to combine that with youth parliaments in a framework is what we're trying right now in Hessen, in the area I'm coming from, in Germany. So different methods to reach different people, to give them all that feeling of being empowered, that idea of actually, making some change. But then, of course, the necessity for all of that is the political will to do that. And even now, in this winter of democracy, where we have big problems with extremists, still I can feel a reluctancy of those who keep power to actually implement that. But that's another story, I assume.
Thank you, Robin. Simona? Okay.
Thank you. Yes, taking a little bit on your example in what you were all talking about, diversity, both of the audiences and the people that we involve in, and also of the methodologies. I can speak a little bit about the work that Gerador does, which of course is quite limited to a local, national level, and of course the majority of the people that are in touch with us and that follow our things are still educated people, majorly middle class, white, largely from Lisbon. But we have been doing an effort in the recent years to bypass a little bit and to become a bit more broad in our audiences and in our methodologies. And I think we are seeing the results of that now, so it's a process that takes time. But speaking of the variety of methodologies, Gerador works in 3 different pillars, mainly so journalism, education, and culture. So the way that we try to reach people, and mostly young people, is by having initiatives from these 3 different pillars. So in journalism, the majority of our team, is also important to say, is below 30 years old. So naturally, the topics that we approach in our editorial strategy are going to be topics that interest young people. And we also do it in a way that we try that it is accessible, dynamic, engaging, visually appealing. And also we have cultural events, so we try to bring in people closer to artistic practices, because we think that that's also a way of getting people to be more creative and therefore more engaged and more participative. And we also have our training courses and research studies within our educational department. So we try to use different pillars to talk in the end about one thing, which is participatory citizenship. And sometimes one of these pillars works more for certain people and other works for other groups. And as for diversifying audiences, we found that it's essential that we have a diverse team as well. So we are not going to be reaching audiences that are outside of our normal sphere if we don't have people who are directly related and engaging with other audiences. So that is very important for us, and also to work with other organizations and nonprofit organizations, small companies that are embedded in certain circles that are different from our own. And so as we develop long-term relationships with these other associations, it becomes easier to reach people who before were out of our usual scope. And just to give a quick example, speaking about youth consultations, of course we also do a lot of those, but because we had been developing this work for a while, I have a quick example. We did a research study about the issues of the countryside of Portugal, and we launched an open call for a youth consultation, but it was a very small thing. It wasn't public, there was no certificate, there were no rewards. It wasn't something that you would immediately think of putting on your CV. And then we weren't really expecting much, and then suddenly we had hundreds and hundreds of responses from young people from all over the country who were already engaged in our content through different ways and channels, who wanted to talk about it. And they weren't all coming from the same backgrounds. They were very different people. Some of them were really not from a highly educated background or academic background. They were just people from all the places in Portugal that you can imagine who wanted to talk about their daily experiences. So I think that the work that we did with some associations throughout the country in other topics and in cultural initiatives that we did ended up bringing people back to a participatory discussion about a topic that was a bit more political. And yes, that's basically it.
Thank you, Clara. I think two ideas that for me highlighted from Clara and Robin is this, probably there is not one solution for the best way to engaging people, but this diversity of approaches, of methods, but also this approach of having the peers to reach and having the people from this background also involved, because they are the best ways to attract, to engage their own peers and to outreach to these young people that sometimes is difficult, can be also very interesting and with surprising results. But before I pass to Sophia and to Simona, I would like just to open also to the audience if there is also some question or some comment or some doubt that you have and you would like to have a reaction from the guests here in the round table. We have Maria Manuel, so I'll ask the colleague from the Curso. But it was also here, and Cynthia and Maria Manuel. Please, Cynthia. Maybe if you project the voice.
Hello.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm Cynthia, I'm from Latvia. I'm one of the steering group members of the PAL network as well. I would like to ask to each of you, could you please point out two main problems or main challenges, what you see at the moment are the main, for young people, especially in your local area? Where do you live? And young people with whom you work with. Two main challenges at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Cynthia. Maybe we collect another question and we pass the ball to the round table. Can you have a microphone here? Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you very much for your interesting discussion and topics. I was wondering about the crisis discourse that Sophia has told us about, because we have seen for a long time this kind of discourse in every area you can imagine, from youth to education and so on, so democracy also. And I was wondering if that kind of discourse is not has a positive is not a positive indicator that we have higher demandings regarding democracy in this case. So we are more educated now. We have young people more educated, at least here in Portugal and in Europe as well. So I'm wondering if the gap between expectations and real politics is not also a result of higher expectations, because people are more demanding and more involved and more critic about political actors' actions. So that's a good point, right? And I see that also in youth movements, youth engagement, and youth participation. I think there's a lot of, as Bruno said, a lot of associations, ONGs, etc., and not top-down as it used to be 15 years ago, but in the inverse, reverse direction. So created by young people and thinking about a more huge diversity of involvements. So I'm old, but I am optimistic about the future of democracies, even illiberal democracies, because there's a huge movement of population and young population. But there's a point that last week we talked about. It's the average age of political actors in the Portuguese parliament, at least. The average age of parliamenters has been higher and higher. So young people, opposite of what was the case 15 years ago, when democracy has been raised in Portugal. There were a lot of young deputies, and now there are more older political actors. So that's also a way of not putting young people's themes and other kinds of problems in the core of the decisions.
Thank you, Maria Manuel, also for the optimistic view, and just to pass also here the floor to the colleagues, just to see the problems identified at local level, to problems that can be allied, but also a reaction to this. Just to highlight that last week also these numbers, they were shocking. And when we go to the Portuguese Parliament, that is 205, 308 municipalities, 305 deputy members, 230, sorry, thank you. 305 municipalities, I'm also in 230 deputy members. It was less than 5% that was under 30 years old, so between 18 and 30 years old. And we are representing almost 20%, young people. Sometimes I still remember my times of being young, but young people are still representing almost 20% of the Portuguese population. But then their issues are not there. But when we go to local authorities, and I look to one representative local authority, and it's a rare example, Miguel Gavinhos, also a friend and a colleague from Vice President of the Municipality of Fundão, also the colleague from Maria Manuel was showing how in the beginning of democracy there was a lot of mayors and deputies that were young people, and now they are a rarity. They are really a rarity. So, and this I think is also important, how we are encouraging young people to get into the political system, to the representative democracy, because otherwise it can be difficult to have then this political willingness that Sofia was also highlighting, that there are people with a willingness to, okay, let's invest in democracy, let's invest in participatory democracy, let's invest in citizens' engagement. But passing, I don't know who would like to start from here. Just.
Thank you so much for your questions. So I think we can relate both questions. Should I answer both? Yes? Okay. So, sorry. So one thing that comes to my mind is how I started to be involved in youth participation. And it started with youth associations and student associations when I was younger, when I was starting high school. And nowadays, I'm involved in this youth association that Bruno mentioned at the beginning, that is called Bringing Europeans Together Association, or BETA, which is a big European youth association, but has branches in every European Union state member. And our main focus is to inform and literate about European Union affairs. And our main event is a simulation, which we call Model European Union, which we divide between the Council and the European Parliament. And we try to do this every year, and every year we get the help of, not every year, unfortunately, but we usually get the help of the Parliament in Portugal to make this, and we go there and we make our simulation with students, all from the age of 16 to 25, 26. And we always try to get deputies to come over and to be part of the simulation so that we can find some common ground between the young people and the people that are in power, as we were mentioning. Because when we think about the people that are in power, unfortunately, I always think of 50-year-olds here in Portugal, because as I said about the average years of who's in parliament, I think it's like 45 or 50, and I know that from the 230 deputies that we have, 20 have the age below 35. So this is really shocking for me. I just recently discovered this. But one thing that I can think it's one of the main problems regarding the first questions here, maybe it's the generational gap that happens between the young people and the people that are in these political positions. And I think that doing activities that maybe we are not used to in formal education, that we find common ground between all of these people can make us feel more informed about what is happening, which is our goal with our association, and to make us feel that we can have something to say if we're also informed about what is happening, and if we can engage with these people that sometimes feel that are miles away but are not. And regarding the second problem that about the first question, I think that with this, we also have to be empowered in a way that we can be engaged in this discussion and conversations, because a lot of times, me as a young person, I'm very passionate about some topics, but maybe I cannot express myself correctly or in a formal way that maybe the people in power are gonna get. And I think if we have that type of critical thinking and that type of confidence build up, maybe we are also viewed as people that can really participate and not just be tokenized, I believe. So yeah.
Should I go? Okay. So, what? I think that's stuck. So regarding the question about the gap and if it's the case or not that we are seeing this gap because citizens are demanding more. That is partially true. I mean, Pippa Norris, who is a very famous American political scientist, she developed this theory about the fact that today we have these critical citizens. Citizens are demanding more from political authorities, they are more critical, they are vocal, and expressing their dissatisfaction with the political process and political actors and so on. Still, even though the gap is happening because, of course, we also have more citizens demanding more, still the problem, we still have the problem of the gap between those demands and what is happening and how our democracy is functioning. So I don't see it as something positive. I mean, it's clear something important and relevant, the fact that we now have a more critical voice and we are expressing and demanding more from our political elites. But because the gap is still so large between our demands and the delivery of those demands, we still have the same issue, even though we can look at as something that is happening because of that. I also would like to say that we talk about diversity. Diversity has a problem of scale, because if we aim, and we should aim for enlarged diversity in these public engagements, experiences, democratic innovations, and so on, we have then the problem of scale and how to set up that and how to reach these specifically hard-reach populations and so on. And I think another important element for discussion that I'm not sure if we mentioned before is literacy. And education. I think that's quite important. I like to see these problems through the supply and demand framework. So we can look at the supply, so look at how political institutions, political actors see the participation of ordinary citizens in the political process, what are they doing, the experiences they are putting in place, and so on. But we can also look at the demand side, what citizens are doing by themselves, what citizens are demanding from their political authorities, and I think that's an important framework to study these issues, the supply and demand framework. There is one issue that, I mean, it's quite interesting for me, the youth parliaments. It's quite interesting because we don't have data. We don't really have data about the impact of youth parliaments. That's quite puzzling for me. So I didn't show, but I have this graph that shows, at least in Portugal, that the schools that are engaged over the years in the youth parliament program in Portugal has been increasing tremendously over the years. It's quite linear, that increase. However, we do not know who are those students, what is the impact of the youth parliament, that kind of activity. We don't know if we are reaching to low-income students, if the schools that have less resources, that have more low-income students, that have students with parents with no college degree, for instance, if they are the ones participating. We don't know that. We probably can assume that those participating in this kind of exercise are the ones that are already slightly interested in politics or some specific issues, because that's another important theme. When we study youth and politics, what appears is that young people prefer to use different channels of participation than the traditional ones, and that perhaps what moves young people to participate is specific important issues that matter for them, such as climate change or gender issues, and so on. So that's quite important. I really like the idea of the youth parliament, and I have the data on the number of schools in Portugal, but we don't have much more than that. So it's quite a black box. We can only assume and speculate about the impact of such programs. And that's also important because in order to overcome these issues and in order to overcome these problems, pathologies, the challenges, and so on, we need to have data to evaluate these instruments, to evaluate these strategies, and so on. So the Portuguese Parliament now, since 6 years ago, has a new electronic platform for petitions, for citizens' initiatives, and citizens' referendums, which is also interesting that we have 3 different forms to participate in the legislative process in Portugal. But we don't have data, or I mean, you can find that data, but no one is studying that, and we don't have the data necessary to evaluate how these processes are happening, what is the impact of this process, who is participating or not. There is a colleague, Tiago Tiburcio, who is a political scientist, but is now advisor of the president of the Portuguese Parliament, and he probably is the only one scholar that did some kind of research on who petitions, who submits and signs petitions in Portugal. And what he found was that you have a pattern of people that already are interested in politics, that already have college degrees, and so on. So again, and that would be my perhaps final comment in this round, we need to also demand for more data accessibility and to measure having the platforms and the resources to evaluate these platforms, these instruments, these strategies that are in place. As again, regarding with to youth parliaments, which is an incredibly interesting project since the 90s. I think it was in 95 from the socialist, was an idea, in Portugal at least, was an idea from a socialist female MP in 95, so it is a very long program that we have, but we don't have any kind of data to evaluate its impact. So that's another element to add, another layer to add to this discussion. Thank you.
Clara, if you mind. All right. Well, Sophia, it looks like a double PhD coming up then when it comes to the data of youth parliaments, and maybe look at it. No, kidding, of course, but I guess there's two thoughts I have on youth parliaments and their efficiency. If I may limit myself to that real quick. On the one hand, voter turnout for youth parliaments in Germany is surprisingly low. Around less than 10%, 7 to 10% of the young people eligible to vote for the youth parliament in my municipality, Wiesbaden, in Germany, are actually doing that. And we have the same numbers pretty much all over the country. So from that perspective, there really is a little bit of criticism that is that makes sense. But on the other hand, I feel like even though if we don't have data regarding youth parliaments in a strict sense, the idea of educating young people to become democrats themselves by actually being part of something like a parliament, however it may be organized, because there's so many different ways of organizing a youth parliament, I feel there's a big value in that already, to create competencies, values already for every young person that is at least taking part in these parliaments. Maybe they realize, okay, I don't feel as if I can really contribute to change here. Maybe they feel, okay, I should run for the true parliament. That is a value in itself, probably. But just like you, I would be very excited to find out more about youth parliaments and how they actually have an effect on a political landscape.
Okay, so I will just quickly comment on the two questions, although I feel like my colleagues have answered and they are better qualified than I am because they have studied these subjects. So I'm just going to speak from my experience in my work. I think two of the main issues that young people that we work with are facing, one of them Sophia already mentioned, and actually I think she mentioned both of them, but is the lack of literacy. I feel like there is a lot of things that are communicated in a way that people don't understand and that they haven't been given the opportunity to have the tools to start understanding them, and that to me feeds into the second issue, which is a feeling of disconnection, which is fed by many other factors, which Sophia also mentioned in her presentation, but a feeling of disconnection that makes people feel like politics isn't for them, and to not see how formal politics and democracy impacts their daily lives. And I will take on that to answer the second question. I think it's a very interesting perspective, and I think it does make sense for a part of society, but I don't think it explains how in other sectors of society people are feeling that politics isn't for them. So I don't think that comes from being too demanding. I think that comes from feeling rejected by the way that the system is working. So I think in the way maybe there are two completely different sides of the coin. On one side, people are being more demanding and they have the tools to, and the education, the context to be that demanding. On the other side, people are not just demanding more, they are just stopping to care because they feel like they are not being cared for. So yeah, that's my input.
Thank you, Clara. Thank you, everyone. We will need to start closing our round table and starting to move to the coffee break because there's then more things on our conference. But I would like to thank you very much for bringing this youth perspective. For sure, we'll not solve. We don't have this answer of the $1 million answer. But for sure that they will tackle many different aspects of this diversification of matters, the outreach, how we are encouraging also young people to get inside of the system, the fact of the political literacy and the education. And sometimes, and I think we have people that are here involved in different actors, such as youth work and the role of youth work in experimenting, trying, focusing on this topic. It's not a sexy topic, it's not a trendy topic, but it's a fundamental topic. The role of schools. The schools are living laboratories for practicing, trying democracy. Everything is there. So how we are working with schools, not just to prepare young people to participate, but also to practice democracy. Or if we look at the local authorities, and here I need to push a bit of the agenda of DIPAL, as they are the closest link to young citizens, to citizens, and their role of trying things different, of trying and experimenting, sharing power, experimenting really to innovate on how democracy is done. But I think we also need help, and we need also to see if what we are doing and trying is reaching results. For example, we are supporting the youth participatory budget in 15 schools in the municipality of Cascais. We're in the process that is young people that do all the process, from the voting to the table discussions to everything. And we still don't know the data. We know the data of evaluating that they're happy, they like, they want to be more engaged and so on. But in reality, how much of these young people, they leave this secondary schools and they get involved in other political process, we don't know. And we need help to try to measure these things. We need help to try to measure the impact of the youth councils, of the youth parliament, of every and many different bodies that are in experimenting. So I think academic here will also have an important role to support this topic and to support practitioners of youth work, the NGOs, the municipalities trying to work. And I would just like to close about with a sentence that I'll steal from Clara, that often young people and citizens, they don't know how politics influence their lives. Because I think if they would know this, they would assume themselves as politicians, that all of us we are, even if we don't know. But I think this is very important for us to continue working this topic and raising the importance that politics is too much important to be left alone or to be left without our engagement. Thank you very much, and I'll pass the floor to Carolina for the next steps. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. No, you can. Thank you, Sophia, Simona, Clara, Robin. I think it was really interesting to listen your perspectives, and more than answers, we have more questions. But it's a good food for thoughts. So let's slowly start the second part of our conference. As I told you in the morning, or in the beginning, it's still morning because we didn't have lunch yet. Our flow for this conference was to have some data to be discussed and to be reflected on with the support of some young people that we had here. And now it's the time to see concrete practices. So how are different people with different backgrounds trying to improve democracy, trying to improve youth engagement, youth participation, youth leadership? And for that, I have here three amazing guests. I'm not alone, as you can see, right? And I have Bernardo, Marta, and João. João, it's a very Portuguese name, usually very difficult to pronounce. But it can also be John. Not really. And they will present the projects, and they have many different activities implemented in many different places, and they will present it in a very brief presentation what they have been developing. We will start with Bernardo. Bernardo is the founder of My Polish. I don't want to spoil what My Polish is, but it's a tool, a digital tool, a space, and I was reading the description, and it's to make democracy accessible to everyone. It's quite ambitious, no? Quite ambitious, but Bernardo will show us how my Polish, how it looks like, and a bit of what they have been doing and how they have been implementing this tool. So, Bernardo, the floor is yours. Yeah.
aqui o microfone, não é?
Ah, sim.
Este
Ou este também.
Um, dois, três. Okay. You are completely right. Quite a mission. And we have quite a mission also because we have quite a social problem. Global voter turnout is decreasing pretty much everywhere in the world. This is especially significant in Europe, of course, but you can see it's a global trend, and we have to do something about it. And a part of the solution might be getting young people to vote, and a different part of the solution might be increasing the quality of our democracy as far as participatory democracy is concerned. Focus less on the representative side of how democracy is organized, and focus, put a little bit more effort and create more opportunities when it comes to have direct pacts for children and young citizens to engage with their political representatives and transform their territories by doing so. And that's what we have been trying to do at MyPolish. And I will show you how. We have a motto: democracy is fun. It should be fun at least. And what we have been trying to do is use gamification and participatory processes that are attractive to young citizens. Because we believe that in order to get children and youngsters to participate, we have to play their game. We have to go to their comfort zone and create processes that can be appealing to them and fun. Why not? And they're also fun to political decision makers. This guy here is the president of one parish council in Portugal, actually the largest one in the country, and you can see he's having the time of his life. He actually enjoyed that game very much. With MyPolish, over 150 public representatives have collaborated and co-created with more than 30,000 young citizens. We started by creating an e-democracy platform. That was our first go on this social problem. But soon we understood that to achieve impact integrity and to tackle such a multidimensional problem, we would have to have a toolkit of solutions in order to, on one hand, build capacity with children and youngsters, on the other hand, provide concrete opportunities for direct participation. And that's what we have been doing. I would highlight these two stats. We started working in schools because of that, because we saw that we needed to build capacity and change the way citizenship is taught in the classroom. And teachers have loved our educational program on citizenship. 99% of teachers evaluated MyPolish with 7 or higher on a 0 to 10 scale. This is quite something. We were, even ourselves, surprised by this stat. And 79% of students will evaluate MyPolish with 7 or higher on the same 0 to 10 scale. So on each 5 students, 4 of them are enjoying participation much more because of MyPolish, and this is also a great result. We are currently working in 30 territories, mostly in Portugal, but also with a few experiences abroad. We have some recognition, but I don't think this is the most important, but I will just underline maybe the Digital Democracy Award from the Portuguese representation at the European Commission, but I think this is much more fun to talk about. This is how we do it with children from elementary school. We have created a board game, and in this board game, they have cards, they have challenges, and they have concrete materials that the teacher can use himself inside the classroom. And this game will guide them in the process of understanding how democracy works. Then they will have the opportunity to explore the territory, get out of the classroom, conduct interviews with community members, gather inputs that they will then use inside the classroom, debate, vote to deliberate, and then come up with a specific proposal that the whole classroom will collaborate to implement in partnership with their political representatives. When students get older, we do it with a different game, but also with the same structure: knowledge, exploring, ideation, action, and sharing with political representatives. And the whole classroom has to collaborate in order to complete these missions and get the city colorful. In the beginning, it is quite gray, and they are getting collaboratively the city more colorful as they progress in the game. We also have a different game, so you see that we have different tools to achieve different impact goals. This one is particularly focused on increasing literacy, democratic literacy among students that have no clue about how democracy works. So working with very young children from 10 to 14, usually. And the challenge with this game is get inside this old mansion and solve citizenship challenges. It's quite, it's kind of a digital escape room. I don't know if you know the concept. They will have to find things inside the house to progress in the game. A few characters will guide them along the way. For instance, here, they'll have to take this book out of the shelf and a secret passage will open. And inside that passage, they will get to know their local political representatives. Not only local, national, and European, actually. They will know what do these people do, who are the persons that are occupying this office, and we try to humanize as much as possible political representatives. We think that's part of the solution. They will get to know inside this game which type of elections exist, what is a null vote, how do we vote, why we do it. In this part of the game, they will get to know about different types of assemblies, from the European Parliament to the assembly of an association. How do they work? What is a minute? So all of that are concepts that are completely away from our regular 12 years old student, let's say. So this game does a great job in bringing those concepts to the arena. Also the SDGs, there is also a lab where they can try creating solutions for the territory. And I'm showing a lot of digital tools, but we also believe in an online to offline methodology, so to say. So basically, when you look at the classroom that is implementing these games, you usually don't see a lot of kids playing in their phones. They will be interacting, debating among themselves, and we also have a toolkit of materials ready for teachers to implement in the classroom. So it's, I think, a part of our success inside schools is about providing teachers with a plug-in solution that they can start implementing right away. And of course, a big part of participatory processes are having an actual outcome when it comes to transforming the territory. That is key, and that will be needed if we are to reinforce future participation. We have more than 200 actually implemented proposals in the different territories that we are working on. I bring 2 examples to you. This is a very simple one, a bus stop in Torres Vedras, powered by sunlight because the students thought this should be the way. What I think is the most interesting about this proposal is not the bus stop itself, but the fact that students are passing by every day to get to school, and they are remembering that this is here because of public participation, because they chose to participate and engage with their town hall. And I think that's very inspiring. This is a different example from the south of Portugal, Lagoa. This girl here, Lara, she wanted to help families in need in her territory, Lagoa. So she and her colleagues, they created the Solidarity Fair that has now over 10,000 participants. They have gathered a lot of food and other goods that they shared with families in need in the territory. And over 50 entities are annually involved in this event. And all of these came from a classroom where they were doing a participatory process, such as the one that I showed you. So this is how powerful it can be. This is very transformative when it comes to this community, for instance. And as these 2 examples, we have 200 proposals, youngsters planting trees, youngsters developing campaigns for the human rights and gender equality in their schools. So all of these are examples of what our citizenship agents have been doing on the ground. We are also measuring always the impact that we have as far as competences are concerned. We do before and after evaluation many times with the control group when we can. And we have seen an increase in autonomy, creativity, for instance, a big boost in awareness about participation channels. So usually the typical student has no clue on how to engage, and the available communication channels with their representatives, and we see a very relevant increase on that. Students' responsibility towards the school space itself is always also a big plus. This is our team. We build these tools, games, and the platform in-house, so we combine a tech design education. This is also a fun crew, you can see by their faces. This is more a business-oriented slide, so don't pay too much attention to it, but just to give you an overall idea, we have 30 clients, 40 funded projects, high satisfaction from teachers and public representatives. That's very important for us. We are always monitoring that. And we are starting to test these solutions in other countries such as Spain, Norway, and Cape Verde, where we are working with the national government and the national parliament to do this in the whole country, in the different islands. I will end this presentation by saying that it's quite a mission, so true, and we of course won't be able to tackle it all by ourselves, not even 1%. But I think that we are pointing in a direction which I think is very, very interesting, and other entities can explore it as well, which is trying to make civic engagement less of a formal thing, trying to bring it to a zone that will be more comfortable for youngsters to actually participate in the future because of that. So I'd like to thank you for this opportunity. Deepal, congratulations for creating this amazing event. I'm very happy to be here with you guys, very looking forward to hearing your presentations as well. And I'd like to say that I would be keen on working with some of you, so I will be around, and feel free to come talk to me if you'd like to try these on your territories and make partnerships. We are up for it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Obrigada, Bernardo, and thank you for being brief. If you have questions, we will have, in the end, a small round of questions, okay? So please take notes. From now, we will move on and listen to Marta Rodrigues. So Marta, she really wears her mission. So that's, you can see from that yellow t-shirt, Marta is representing Movimento Transformers. So it's a Portuguese NGO. They have many cool projects, but one of them, it's this superpower school. And Marta herself was also a volunteer for this superpower school. She's nowadays the communication manager. She is very passionate about design. I must say that Movimento Transformers is really good communicating what they are doing. So yes, Marta, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, fellow activists, if you do. And good morning to everyone who believes in the power of passion and community. Today, I believe we gather here not just as individuals, but as a collective force that believes and is challenged to exploring the challenges of today's democracy. In this journey, I'm sure we will meet, and we have just met, some examples of resilience, overcoming, success, and of course, some examples of system-wide impact, such as Movimento Transformers. Picture this: a group of young people born with their eyes on the world, their hearts wide open, and an unstoppable desire to transform and participate. This was the establishment of Movimento Transformers in 2010. But Movimento Transformers is more than a movement. It's the living proof of what a passionate community can make when everyone is gathered. Let me take you back to the streets where this all began. Imagine hip-hop beats going through alleys, vibrant graffiti, painting and telling stories on concrete walls, and young people getting to know what their talent is in the most unexpected places. This was the beginning through the heart and the hands of João Brites, this boy who is dancing here. And with this, Movimento Transformers realized that we could transcend barriers, we could challenge the rules, and of course, we could speak the language of the streets, where democracy finds its true pulse. Or at least, we believe so. In the heart of our intervention lies volunteering with our mother project, Superpower Schools. As you may know, Portugal has one of the worst participation rates in Europe, only with 7.3% of volunteering rate when compared to the European rate that is more or less 19%. And so, with our Superpower Schools project, we want to change that. Every week, a mentor, a volunteer mentor, teaches a group of kids or youth at risk a talent. And the main goal of this project is that with whatever talent you're learning, kickboxing, hip-hop, painting graffiti, urban dances, or whatever, you can make a payback to your community. You're going to give back to the community what you have learned. I can give you a short example of what is payback. Some years ago, here in Lisbon, a group of apprentices during a whole school year learned how to break dance, and by the end of the year, they were challenged to make a payback, and they identified the problem in their community, that there were few donators of medullary bone genes from their race, and so they said, okay, we learned how to break dance, let's make a show, let's invite other groups, and to enter the show, you have to sign as a donator. And they could collect more than 300 new signatures for the Portuguese Bank of Donators. And so this is the core value of Transformers, payback. But behind this, we, throughout the years, understood that this wasn't really enough. Apart from being validated by the Carlos Gulbenkian Foundation and our impact also studied by the Faculty of Psychology and Science Education of University of Porto, we understood that this wasn't really enough. We needed to tailor and design more and more solutions to more and more public so we could have more people engaged in their communities. And so we started working on different fields, such as associativism and awareness. Examples of the projects that we have developed in these areas are our intensive bootcamps that we adapt to each reality of each school every year, and also a program that we designed and developed last year with the High Commission for Migration that involved more than 1,000 participants from 64 different regions of Portugal. Also, all of our programs are designed such as social franchise, so it can be implemented in any part of the world. We do this with the right partnerships because we do believe that we just can have a systematic change if we work all in the same direction and all in and off borders. Another great example of this global approach that Transformers have is T Academy. T Academy is an online community for social and civic participation where anyone from any part of the world can be part of. By only giving an annual fair contribution that is totally up to you, you can be part of this Slack community where you gain access to lots of contents related to opportunities in the areas of volunteering, impact system, creativity, non-formal education, etc. So, sorry if I'm going too fast, but I really want you to reflect on this. As you see, Movimento Transformers' journey is an open path. And we consider this a call to action, a reminder that democracy thrives when communities actively engage. We ask you, the young minds in this room, to find your passions and to channel them into making a difference. And you can start right now, today, because now we have a campaign where you can all be part of our future. Let me just technical break to pass a video. We have spent the last 12 years helping thousands of young people discovering their passions and using those talents to unite their communities. But we no longer fit in a classroom. We want to have an open space where talents are cultivated and communities come together. In this space, there will be dance, there will be painting, there will be poetry, football, kickboxing, skating, laughter, tears, and hugs. It is here that the seeds of the next activist movements will be planted, where voices will be amplified, and where the next generation of leaders will emerge. In the coming years, Movimento Transformers commits to opening the doors of a street academy, a space for creators and believers in the power of community. We may not have a name or a location yet. We may not have even the name of the brand or a sponsor, but we have a vision, and we need you. Join us in the journey to discover your talents and find your home, because in doing so, you become part of this movement that believes in homes for everyone. Movimento Transformers is more than just a movement, as I said before. It's a force shaping democracy. And you can be part of this force, as I told you. Because let's be the change. Embrace our talents and build a democracy where every voice is heard, every talent is celebrated, and every home is open to all. Thank you for your time, your passion, your talent, and your commitment to shaping a better future. Together, we will transform our society. Thank you.
Obrigada, Marta. I like this idea. Both of you had these QR codes. Yeah, it's good also for people to get to know more info about these projects. And now, moving to the last project that will be presented. With us, we have João Figueirinhas Costa. He is part of the Academia Próxima Geração, or Next Generation Academy. And he sees himself as a talent manager, and we were talking about talent, so I guess that it's a good next person to go after. And a Next Generation Academy, it's a political leadership incubator. And we have been talking about political education and literacy. So I guess that João will have some insights, tips for us how to make this possible. So thank you, João.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks for having me, and thanks for the opportunity to speak to all of you. Just one disclaimer. Próxima Geração, or Next Generation Academy, we've been on for less than 2 years, so it's going to be nothing compared to what these two guys just presented. So let's go. So the context is, at every point in history, democracy faces challenges. And if you look at Portugal right now, we're a young democracy, roughly 50 years old. We're at the tipping point between first and second generation political operators or politicians. We're currently going through institutional crisis in government, the presidency, and justice. This is very recent. Fake news, AI, growing polarization, all of these big buzzwords are increasing in problems. And we are currently in the context of at least 3 more public geopolitical crises. So it's kind of, we're at this point where it's quite overwhelming just to see what is the state of democracy. For our democracy, it is essential to, and you guys all know this, transparent debates, a strong citizenship and activism culture, looking for concrete solutions, and having great politicians. And it is critical that we close the distance between citizens and public leadership, and the last roundtable spoke about this, and I think everyone kind of speaks about this in one way or the other. High abstention rates, citizens worried about the future generations, a lot of schooling, but it seems like the state of democracy does not necessarily improve. There's also this widespread idea that youth is not interested in politics, and I believe this is an urban myth. This said, the rate of participation is actually quite low in Portugal and in Europe, but in Portugal especially. We have the generation that is now between ages 30 and 40 have been through EU integration, Troika, and COVID. Young citizens are just distant from politics and don't believe in politics, or at least the traditional ways of participation. So what are we doing about it? We put together a team of 10 co-founders. We formally registered an NGO, and we all come from startups, tech startups, academia, and innovation consulting backgrounds. Our mission is to improve the Portuguese democratic system. We do this by promoting active and participated citizenship, ideas, training tools, and global collaboration. We're value-driven and anchored in these 4 values: transparency, public interest, pluralism, and pragmatism. And we are a political leadership incubator. What is this? It's a non-partisan training academy for the politicians and active citizens of the future, hence next generation. The methodology is quite new, but it's not really game-changing, but we're just putting together a really good program. We use project-based learning, inspiration, sessions, disruptive workshops, as we call it. It's very much peer and community-based in how we review documents, how we have our discussions. It's a 12-week hybrid training program. So we have 4 immersive weekends, and we have 12 weeks of online content going on. And when I say content, it's not self-paced, it's actually synchronous content where we actually build a cohort of students. Weekly challenges with your own learning wiki like you have at universities, a lot of content. Weekly missions you have to deliver working as teams or individually. 4 immersive weekends where we actually go locally to a different city hall. These are some of the places where we've been in the last 2 editions, where we speak to city halls, politicians, local communities, local NGOs, local stakeholders that are relevant, and we do political work. Like Bernardo was also saying, some of the challenges they do at MyPolis, we go out there, the kids do surveys, or the young participants do surveys, they understand what the local problems are, they try to design and build solutions. We also have these more academic institutional visits like Parliament, Presidency, and a few other places. And one of the big things we have is the types of guests we bring, either for the workshops, for the exercises, or for the sessions and for the mentoring. These are only a few examples, but it goes from academics to active politicians, to former politicians. We have a former prime minister, we have mayors, we had Inês, who is one of the founders, or one of the big people at the movement Transformers. So we have quite a few different people, very diverse, from all ranges of political parties, ideologies, and all of that. Again, it's a non-partisan. We're just trying to really build the context for better democracy. And then when it comes to impact, obviously the participants are the right way to look at it. So this is the participant profile so far. We've roughly had 50 people so far. We have another cohort coming in early next year, between the ages of 17 and 30, average age 24, all types of backgrounds from literally all of the country and Ilhas islands, Portuguese islands. Diverse-based political ideology, so it's diverse in all senses when it comes to how diverse we can get with 50 people for now. Here you can see the pictures of the 2 cohorts. And this is some of the immediate impact. And please bear in mind that we do expect longer term impact, but this is the short term impact given these cohorts happened a year ago. We had a neighborhood association being created by one of our youngest participants at age 18. It now has 350 members. It's the Associação de Moradores Miraflores, if you're from around Lisbon, because there was concrete problems she wanted to solve, and it's basically her and a whole bunch of 60-plus-year-olds lobbying the city hall for specific things they want to change. We had a theater production about the Portuguese Revolution starting. We have lobbying in Parliament happening from some of our participants. One is about food waste, law improvement. One that actually was rolled out was one of our participants. He designed a new law about diabetes treatment that basically in 3 months, it was already in the agenda for Parliament, but he just lobbied to redesign how it was going to happen. and it had a direct impact in 20,000 families who had young kids with diabetes. And he's actually now running in the primary elections in one of the left-wing parties in Portugal to be the candidate for the European elections. We had participation in municipal assembly in Trás-os-Montes. So people started to become activated and wanting to become more participant after participating at the academy. And one of the big things is it's not just about the 12-week program. That's obviously not enough. It's about what you do after the 12-week program. So the alumni network, how we're building it, how we're engaging it, and the type of tools, context, and exposure we're trying to give them, and it's very much self-managed by the alumni themselves. This is a big part of where the value comes, because now they're building little teams to do stuff, and they recruit their teams from within the academy. Obviously, we build this with partners, and this is financed by both public and private sponsors. It has the sponsorship of the president, and this is one of the messages he passed on, which is, this is the start, so it's not a program like this that is the end goal. This is just like a first engagement of, and then it's the beginning of the rest of their lives kind of message. And we do feel this is very true. This is the core operational team, and that's it. Thank you very much.
Obrigada, João. And they drink a lot of water. I'm sorry. Okay. Interesting to see that very different approaches from the digital to more in-person, capacity building, using talents, working at the local level, working at the national level. So for sure there are many, many ways of empowering young people. And for me, one thing that I guess that it's transversal to all of you, it's increased this sense of belonging. Like young people feel that they are part and they can be and they can influence and they have an active role in shaping their communities, in shaping democracy and the future. So for me, this was really interesting to see that it's actually something that all of you do in a more direct or indirect way. But now maybe to give the floor to the audience, I don't know if any of you have some questions to our guests regarding their projects, regarding their initiatives. We have one question there. Maybe you can introduce yourself also for us to know. Yeah.
My name is Carolina. I'm from the youth division of the Setúbal municipality, and we are starting to work with my Polish. We worked with ILPU in the last days and with the professors. So I was start to say that they like very much the project, and they were working in the platform. And I want to say that one of the things that they asked us was about the projects. So they want that the municipality make some of the projects that the youngsters are going to present. And so this is one of the things that we understood, Filipa works with me, we understood that we have to make it happen. And my question is to João. So I was thinking that this kind of project, how many, you have two classes. You have two classes, but it's something that we, as a municipality, we can make a class with you, with some youngsters that we open like a call. This is something that could happen.
Yes, I mean we could partner up in multiple ways. You could become a partner for one of the weekends, for example. That could be one way. Another way could be for you to sponsor local participants who apply from Setúbal, who you want to sponsor them in participating. And another way could be for us to design one more adapted just for Setúbal young citizens to participate. We're actually, I'm not sure if I can say this out loud, but we are having discussions with some municipalities about doing that. So doing a cohort just for the local municipality, for the local, so we actually already have that designed. We would adjust it to Setúbal in this case, but the whole structure, it would be a slightly different version of what we're doing, depending on what your goals are as well.
Yes, because we saw in the last year we are working more in these kind of projects, and we have to chase the young people to participate, and not only these kind of actions, but all of them. And so it's very important for us to work with the young people and for them to know the impact that they have in the territory. So.
But you have a whole portfolio. So you already started with My Polis. You can sponsor a superpower school and a Próxima Geração program, and
we
you
have
already
all
have
of
the
the
whole
contacts.
portfolio here.
Thank you.
Thank you, João. I don't know if we have any other questions to our guests. Yep, Sofia.
Hi, thank you all. My question I have to Bernardo, am I correct? So such a cool project. I think we in political science, we need to explore what you are doing and researching this kind of initiatives. But I have two questions. So one is about to what extent are schools autonomous in terms of funding to get My Polis in the classroom? And the second one is when you are working with schools, I think you probably are overcoming the selection bias, right? Because everyone in the classroom, all students will participate. And I think if that's the case, if I'm not understood correctly, if that's the case, that's a great way of overcoming this particular relevant issue of the selection bias. Because after all, many times we are engaging people that are already interested in civic life, politics generally, and so on. So if that's the case, if the framework of the project deals with this, it's great. So first, congratulations, such a cool project, and these two questions, and thank you all.
Very good points. Thank you for the questions. Regarding the financing model, normally the municipalities are financing the project. It has happened in the past. It has happened. It is possible, but the normal model would be municipalities financing the project and then getting the schools involved because they are such a key part of the process, of course. So yeah, that's the usual scenario. Regarding the inclusiveness, that's such a good question. I think a lot about that. And yes, we have this trick, which is getting a large. We try to get a large part of the students involved. And since they are organized by classes, we are being inclusive in one way, because and sometimes you see it, the less interested students at the beginning of the process then become the shining stars at the end of the game. So that's a cool effect to witness. And furthermore, we for instance, we are now designing a project where we are actually being even more proactive in searching for vulnerable publics to work with an even extra attention. So we are analyzing, for instance, schools that have a high level of immigrants, a high level of people with socioeconomic disadvantages, and doing giving a boost to those schools when it comes to student participation. So yeah, on one hand, being inclusive by default, and on the other hand, being even more proactive in bringing disadvantaged people to the table. And disadvantaged people is a strong word, and it could mean a bunch of different things. It could be people that never had the opportunity to have contact with politics. It might mean maybe someone who is living very far from the center of the city. It might mean someone that came from a different country and has no clue about how to get involved. So we try to bring and shorten the gap between those people and the institutions. So, thank you.
Suddenly we had 3, now we have 1. Thank you, Bernardo. Thank you, Sofia. Any last question? If not, I have one for all of them. Good. Because in the morning, and Sofia brought us here some really interesting insights, data. And one of the things that she said, and if I'm saying wrong, please correct me since you are still in the room, it's that sometimes local authorities, politicians, are not really willing to listen to young people. So the mechanisms are in place, there are the process. It's actually cool for a municipality sometimes to have these programs. Well, we listen to young people, we care, we have this. But then my question, it's actually, and I must say that I work a lot with young people, and sometimes I also feel that there is a lot of weight on young people. Like, you need to change the world. It's your responsibility. You are the ones. And maybe they are, we are, but how are these projects also impacting, working with local authorities? Increasing their awareness of having young people actively influencing policies, not just to show off, not just to have amazing campaigns with young people decorating. How are like those who are elected, those who have the decision power, being involved in your projects, in your movements? And also, how do you see that your projects bring this impact, not just for the local authorities, but also the citizens in general? So I don't know if someone would like to start. Yeah, Bernardo?
That's also a very, very, very important point. We are taking it more seriously with time. Each time we are thinking more about that topic, and we even made the decision to stop working with the municipality, which of course meant stop doing business with that municipality because they were not taking young participation seriously enough. So they would just show up in assemblies and talk a little bit with youngsters and paternalize them a little bit. So, and of course we don't want that, and we have to be vigilant to prevent this kind of participatory processes to be jeopardized because of this posture and this approach by political representatives. So yeah, I think that's something very important to bear in mind. I think that we in every territory that opens a new participatory process needs to have at least flagship proposals, that they have case studies in which they have collaborated with young citizens to strengthen the participatory process, because they will know if they are being paternalized and used as decoration, as you mentioned, they will know, and they will not participate in a second edition of the program, let's say. A good example of that is participatory budgeting in Portugal. Amazing public policy, widely spread out throughout the country. And I like the instrument itself. It's highly resilient, very well-defined expectations, and very balanced process that uses votation to actually balance expectations at the beginning of the process. So a lot of features in the process are very good, and that's why it's a huge success in terms of adoption. And I talked to a lot of political representatives, and I have been witnessing it with my own eyes. Participatory budgeting slowly disappearing, even in territories where it has been successful in the past, because of the implementation phase. Because the participatory process itself, until the implementation phase, because the implementation phase could also be a part of the participatory process, in fact, but all of it goes very well. You can engage youngsters, you can have them vote in a digital platform or in person, doesn't matter. But then if you don't get things done, and it's hard because of, como é que se diz contratação pública? Public procurement, thank you. Because of public procurement, it makes things even harder because there are waiting periods and all of that. But we have to be agile, and sometimes even lower expectations at the beginning, make the projects simpler, more simple, and then have them executed in a short time span. Because the cycle should be shorter when you are working with young citizens, because they have expectations that things should happen fast. And that asymmetry between time spans sometimes may jeopardize participatory processes. So yeah, that's something that we think about every day, and it's a very relevant question for this discussion.
So, firstly, I totally agree with you, Bernardo, and also because the majority of our projects are funded by the municipalities. Firstly, I also want to focus on one thing that so the public and political agents are not lost in our activities that are more aimed to youngsters. What we do is we try to make sure that our apprentices, the ones that are in our projects, also enroll in political activity. For example, in every municipality that Movimento Transformers is, we take part on the Municipality Council of Youth. And if it doesn't exist, we pressure the authorities to create one. This is a good example. And also, in last year, we, as a team, realized that it was really important to develop an advocacy strategy for the upcoming years. And that started with an invitation from the Body Shop that, together with the United Nations, promoted a campaign that was called Be Seen, Be Heard, and was an advocacy campaign to raise the youth voices about the problems in Portugal and in the world. And with this campaign, we realized, okay, we need to do this every month, every year, try to have a big campaign, and that's why we also took part in the discussion of the national strategy against poverty here in Portugal. And when I say we took part, it's not just like the team members. We engaged volunteers, we engaged young participants through service that we passed through the classes, and so we then studied the data and took that to the discussions. And so I think that is the first part of the solution, because I think some years ago, especially here in Lisbon, people thought of Transformers and pictured breakdancers, and now is a guy in a surf suit and is going to make a pitch in skates. And now we understood, okay, that's really cool, and we don't want to lose that. That's why I'm in trainers. But we also want to be in the places where people with a suit and tie discuss the future of the youngsters here in Portugal. So we do that with the suit and tie people, and then we pressure our kids. So, okay, it's cool to learn a talent to impact our community, but now let's take the next step. For example, we most of the times with the payback actions that I have explained, we ask young people, okay, you want to do this, but who is sponsoring it? Okay, go to the mayor or to any authority and ask, are you in this with us? We are going to do this. We want to have this impact or that impact with this action. So can we involve also the actors, the political actors? Yeah, so I don't know if I was a bit lost, but yeah, that's it. Thank you.
I would just add, I mean, from our experience, the two things I would say. One is, from our experience in organizing Próxima Geração, one is generally speaking, all politicians at any level of government have been very, very open and accepting of our invitations and their ability to participate. And typically what we request of them is not like just show up for 10 minutes somewhere. Typically it implies drive for 2 hours out of where you live and spend 4 hours with us, have lunch with us, and like actually listen. And generally speaking, we have a few rejections due to agenda, which is very common and we understand, of course. But generally speaking, people are very accepting and they actually feel challenged in a way that to participate and actually actively listen to young participants. So that is one from our very specific experience. The second thing is, I think some of the challenges Bernardo and Marta were referring to are challenges in terms of how well the policies are developed, or when it comes to execution stage, the challenges. I think those are challenges that are unrelated to the specific youth programs, but related to the general challenge of managing a municipality, and in parallel to that, the type of qualification we have in local governments. And obviously there are, like in everything, there's, I don't want to stereotype, but generally speaking, from like, we do have very different types of qualification and competence in municipality management, in local government management across the country. And obviously, if I would have to generalize, which is always a risk, bigger municipalities would typically have more professionalized teams, and smaller municipalities with less resource, less budget, all of that would have less professionalized teams. This is obviously not necessarily true, but I think it generally holds as a trend. And I do think that's an issue, and that's a challenge we all have. And the last topic I would say, this is more of a personal opinion, which is, but I think it ties nicely to what you two were saying, which is every time, one of the risks we have when we discuss youth policies is putting youth policies in a box of youth. Like youth policies was a cluster or a cohort of citizens, which, I mean, we can segregate in terms of age, etc. But there's very little policies that are relevant for youth, and they are not relevant for everything else. And what I do think that, one advantage I do think that this categorization brings is, what I do think is true is that given the intergenerational gap in perspective, people who are 60 years old now, on average, have a very different perspective of life, the world, and politics than a 25-year-old, on average. I'm sure there's very old souls at 25, and I'm sure there's very young souls at 60, but on average, I would say this is true. And this will be progressively more and more true with technology and all of these other trends. So I think that the youth perspective on any topic is always relevant, and I think that's the real challenge, more than implementing youth policies, which are very limited in impact. I would say it's about bringing the youth perspective, so bringing young people to the table, is the key challenge we have. Not necessarily implementing specific youth policies, which in my perspective are very limited in their impact. And so it's about bringing young people to the table to share their perspective on any topic, whether it's a grown-up topic or a young person topic. That differentiation doesn't make a lot of sense, in my opinion. So that would be my 2 cents.
Thank you, João. And thank you for presenting your projects. I hope that you stay for lunch, because I guess that maybe here it's a bit tricky and I don't want to share my question, but maybe during lunch people can have the opportunity to approach you and to get a bit more how does it work, if it's possible maybe to see if we can transfer this to other contexts also out of Portugal. We have a lot of international participants, and it would be great also to share some practices. So also feel invited to share with our guests practices that you have, maybe similar projects that you have at the local level, and it would be great also to see this exchange of knowledge and experiences. So we are getting to the end of our conference. From what I have been told, Bruno will come here, but I think that we are good. Thank you. We can stay. Okay, so we stay.
I'll be very fast because it's more than lunchtime now, or it's lunchtime, not more, but it's lunchtime. Just to thank Bernardo, Sofia, João. I think it's one of the functions that DIPAL must have, and we try to have within what is our network and within what is our events and projects, is to make available good examples that can be inspiring, that can bring ideas. We can say, okay, but I have something similar in my country, maybe I can adapt this, or I can invite one of these partners to have an international project or to come to implement. Within the municipalities that we are working in Portugal, the same. So we are still few working on this topic. We need to be a lot more, and I think it's important that we continue this work together, and it's fundamental that we go also showcasing what is done in this topic, because only by then I think we'll be able to change a bit the perspective on how politics is done, the role of youth participation, and how can we improve our democracies, because these projects are helping to improve our democracy within what is our capacity in our scope. But we never know when one of them gets mainstream and gets into a different level of impact. I would also like to thank also the young people that were in the panel and our researchers, Sofia and Simona, Robin, and Clara also for giving us their perspectives. Special thank you for IPDJ, Miguel, David, that have been in the backstage, Dulce, Fátima, Paula, Eduarda, Fernanda, all the people that have been working with us to set this event and to set this week. I can also, to the class that is here from secondary, Esset Caros, okay, and to the teacher, thank you very much for bringing the students to help us to set this setting and to have the conditions to be able to work. A big thank you to all of you for being with us this morning and sharing your thoughts, and hopefully getting inspired and with energy to continue doing what we do and even doing more. And also a special thank you to the DIPAL team, to Mafalda that has been coordinating this event, Alex, Carolina, Emma that is there around taking pictures, Anna, Anthea, and at least part of the team that has been supporting this event. And we are halfway of the Winter Democracy Academy. So thank you for all the guests that also join us today, the groups that are here and will continue working. And hopefully with this practice today, with these discussions, we still have ideas to get inspired in our projects and to write possible European projects that will be tackling this topic. So thank you very much for your participation, and hope that you have still a nice lunch discussing and continue finding ways to collaborate. Thank you very much.